Yeah, with more and more journalists being killed and detained around the world, as well as crackdowns on social media by governments, what is your outlook on getting and sharing information in the future? Oh, can I start with this, Armin? I have something to say. Um, so D, I think that this is, when we talk about more and more journalists being killed and crackdowns on social media. First of all, the crackdowns on social media, it's a big mess. The whole social media trying to figure out how they're going to regulate content. Clearly we know about that. Armin knows about it. I've been through it. We've all been through it. But it was before, if you look back on it, right before. It wasn't just, journalists weren't even allowed to do a lot of things. Everything was much, much more curated. Content was much more controlled before the internet and before social media. There's a lot of things you see right now. Like, for example, the pictures of war out of Gaza, right? That's not something that we saw in any newspapers or magazines, especially in Western media, or actually in any media, really, when I was growing up in the 80s, before the internet. We didn't used to see that. Pictures of the protests in Iran that you see on Twitter and YouTube and everything, we never ever used to see that. So there is an aspect of it now that you actually have more information despite this crackdown. And maybe you have the crackdown happening in response to the fact that all these images, they can't control it. They're still trying to figure it out, right? So I think that overall, we do have more information now. We have more access to information now because the average, it's so strange. They used to talk about the corporatocracy and corporations keeping down the common man. And now that the primary business model for the most successful corporations in the world, like Apple and Facebook and Twitter, is to give a voice to the common man. And you're seeing this around the world. You've had entire, the Arab Spring, the downfall of Mubarak, downfall of Gaddafi. A lot of these things came around because of WikiLeaks. They came around because of Facebook, because of like all these social media organizations, and all the Iranian protests, the Green Revolution in 2009, and so on. So this is something that there is more information now. There is a more of a problem with misinformation, right? Where it's harder to tell misinformation from true information. That's a little bit more of an issue that everybody's trying to figure out and kind of failing at from time to time. And I hope they do figure it out in the future. But I don't think that the situation is worse now. I think it's actually much better than it used to be in the past when I was growing up. That's my view.
It is a lot better.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's very flawed.
Of course.
It's very flawed, given that, as much as Facebook and YouTube and Twitter have made things a lot better, what we want to see now is moving forward to a situation where we don't have these giant institutions have so much say in what we get to say and how we get to say it, right? And you will everything is central, like, because at the end of the day, as long as these are for-profit institutions, and what matters is their ability to be able to operate inside India, inside Pakistan, inside China, because they're driven by profit. There's no like ideological goal that these institutions have. There's not a meta narrative behind what they do that celebrates, I don't know, freedom, democracy. And again, I'm not trying to attack, it's how a for-profit company is supposed to operate. Like, I'm not saying like, oh, these are evil institutions. It's just a DNA of a for-profit institution not to make these the final goal. The final goal is to make profit. And there's a problem when a for-profit institution, at the end of the day, with like a very few group of people that are in charge of making sure that these companies are making profit, are in charge of the largest environments where what they say is the final decision on what conversations are allowed and in what direction, right? That's a problem. And again, I know, like, if somebody might a lot of people might get frustrated by me saying this because it just sounds so future-y, but I am hoping that blockchain world becomes a thing. I'm hoping that we do see more and more platforms built on the different blockchains, because that seems to be the answer. Decentralization seems to be the answer, right? And I don't know if this is going to, I'm not trying to make any predictions if this is going to happen or not, right? But if you think about with free if you think about the movements that made the world a better place, all of them had a decentralization theme, right? Democracy grew in places where centralization of power was not possible. Markets and economies grew when the centralization of capital was not possible, right? And I think access to information and freedom of speech and freedom of knowledge is also going to grow in environments where centralization of control over information is not going to be possible. And I think the response to that is going to be the blockchain technology, right? The way I think about it is that we had the Industrial Revolution, which increased access to energy. And then we had the digital revolution, which increased everyone's access to information. And now we're going through the blockchain revolution, which could potentially increase people's access to freedom. And again, if this happens, there's nothing that could stop it, right? One thing we are doing at the Atheist Republic is that we're experiencing with social media platforms that are still at their infancy, but they're on the blockchain. And I don't know which social media platforms are going to be successful. But so right now, for example, Atheist Republic is on this social media platform called Peaked, Peakd. And like, it's very anti-censorial because it can't be. For example, when you post something on a social media that is based on the blockchain, it's not anti-censorial because the people at the top are deciding not to censor things. It's anti-censorial because they can't censor things. When something is on the blockchain, no force on the planet can remove it, right? So it's anti-censorial, and also it's very flat, as in there's no centralized authority. Like, everybody owns a piece of the social media platform. Like, there's not, the employees don't own it, the people who are using it own, everybody owns a piece of it. Everybody has a say in what the direction the company is going, and everybody is also getting paid for it. Like, when you have decentralized social media platforms, the shareholders, the stakeholders, the users, the staff, and the advertisers, they're all the same people. Everybody is like, it's a mix, it's all over the place. Like, everybody has a stake in the entire future. And with so it's just like, the reason why I don't want to talk about it that much, because it just seems like too good to be true. Like, it just seems like the whole anti, communists seem to be like, oh, we're against hierarchy, right? And we were saying like, well, it's impossible not to have hierarchy, right? But now we seem like apparently capitalism is actually might end up bringing you institutions and decentralized autonomous organizations. They call them DAOs. That all the promises that communism was offering and never seemed impossible to be true. It seems like we could eventually get there with capitalism if blockchain becomes a thing. Like, guys, if you want to know more about this, go look at DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, which is going to be only possible through the blockchain. Anyways, I'm talking about it's too much, because I knew if I get started on this, I'm going to go off. So I'm going to stop here. But again, I think the future is bright if this is going to be a thing. I think at some point, if the world moves to a metaverse, to the blockchain, we're going to have a place where censorship is going to become impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry if I went too long.
Hey guys, if you want to join these streams live, get your comments and questions read by Ali and Armin and the guests, and most importantly, to get full access to the full video versions of all these episodes, become a patron. Link in the description below.